plenty of analysts have said that demand is taking a hit as a result of what we're seeing with regards to tariffs in the United States. Of course, the wobbly economic outlook in China also creating concerns around the demand picture. But where does demand actually stand today from what you're hearing? And do we have any more insights on what the demand picture is going to look like as it evolves through the second half of the year? We focus so much on the supply side. What's happening with demand right now?
Just again, on the supply side, there is perhaps a little bit of overestimation by some agencies when you're trying to calculate how much supply is coming from outside the OPEC group. It's true that the U.S. did a lot of hedging during the time of the conflict, and that perhaps will help it maintain the same levels. We won't perhaps see a decline in U.S. shale. On the demand side, I mean, there are question marks and like constant revisions of where demand is because of this volatility that we're talking about, Dan, because of these uncertain moves that Trump is making with regards to tariffs. But I mean, for example, the announcement of him reaching a deal with Vietnam, that was more or less seen as a positive sign and might translate into more trade deals. In general, the expectation or the mood is that, I mean, Trump kind of went very aggressive in the beginning, and now he's going to start walking back on many of these tariff announcements. Of course, I mean, his decisions are very unpredictable, so we just have to wait and see. But just given the uncertainty, that's why everyone is quite cautious to say that, you know, we're going to see a strong Q3 and Q4.
Indeed, you mentioned the conflict as well, this 12-day conflict between Israel and Iran. There was an oil price spike off the back of that, but prices have since moderated. From what I've heard within the group, there seems to be some level of vindication, in fact, for the strategy, because adding more barrels has created that buffer for what could have been a potential genuine supply disruption. Now, of course, that did not eventuate, but had OPEC not moved and perhaps kept supply restricted, then oil prices would have spiked much more materially higher, which would have been a concern within the group. So that ultimately validates the strategy that they have in place right now. And I think that's also interesting to pick up. I mean, on another issue here, of course, we're seeing headlines today around the fresh US sanctions on Iranian supply. And I think this is interesting too, because on the one hand, President Trump said in the aftermath of the conflict that he would be happy for Iran to continue to sell barrels to China. Now the US is cracking down on that illicit trade. What do you make of that?
When he first announced, Dan, that you know, China can go ahead and buy more Iranian oil, we didn't take that for face value. He just said that there was no, I mean, he just meant that there was no disruption in the Strait of Hormuz, and it's back to kind of business as normal, and China, you know, continuing its buying activities as normal. No indication, or I didn't read that as a removal of sanctions. On the contrary, I mean, the Iranians just pulled out of the UN atomic agency, and that caused us, and again, like a spike in oil prices. This conflict didn't end with a clear resolution, and we're yet to see that materialize. So until then, I do expect the U.S. to continue pressuring Iran with sanctions. And there was another objective too going into this conflict, and I mean, President Trump made it very clear in his tweets that he would want to see a change in the Iranian regime, which didn't have. And perhaps, I mean, his part of the calculation is that these sanctions would help pressure that kind of change in Iran.
Indeed, it's a good point. So with regards to this latest wave of sanctions, do you see Iran ultimately finding a way around these new restrictions, or will this be a genuine squeeze on Iranian supply?
Well, Dan, I mean, just looking at all the sanctions that have been announced on Iran, they managed to find a way. And now they have a kind of very sophisticated network and system of exporting barrels. And these barrels, I mean, the lion's share here, all the volumes, they go to China. So I don't think the introduction of more sanctions, unless it's followed by very, very rigorous implementation, is going to have an impact, but of course we're closely monitoring that.
Indeed. How closely is the market watching this July 9 tariff pause deadline? And do you think a failure there could ultimately maybe, even a failure when it comes to deals with countries like Japan, for example, which has also been in the headlines? Also, this EU deal really hanging in the balance. Do you think a failure on any of those potential trade deals could maybe trigger some renewed volatility in crude? I think this is maybe something that the market hasn't necessarily been paying enough attention to. Amena, what's your take?
Absolutely. I think, it is being watched, but it's not a major factor. I think maybe the market is closely watching what OPEC does as opposed to what's happening with these trade deals. But it does have a direct impact. If there is no positive announcement around a resolution, then that would directly, again, have an impact on demand. It's all kind of sentiment related, Dan. It's not necessarily, something happens and then immediately you have a lower demand, but it's just something down the line, and it will create, again, negative sentiment, which might weigh on prices. The last thing I want to say is on stock levels. Just year on year, Dan, if you look at the IEA data, we are seeing a draw in global stocks of around 90 million barrels. So that's still a sign, something that OPEC watches very closely, are stock levels. So that's a positive sign that they're able to continue with this unwinding of the cuts.
Indeed. So with everything in play at the moment, everything filtering into this market, OPEC, Iran, and of course these trade deals to come as well, what's your base case for WTI over the next 6 months? What's the internal assumption on where oil will actually trend?
Well, everybody's kind of been wrong when it comes to forecasting this year, because it's been a very volatile and deal, and this conflict in the region really wasn't expected at all. It's hard to forecast how these things would play out. Oil prices could maintain the current ground, but these near-term announcements that might be made on, especially on the trade deals, that might have some kind of bearish impact. But overall, are prices likely to hold in the kind of 60s? That's a likely scenario.